It's been said that to appreciate the good days, you have to endure the bad ones. In eastern North Carolina, we know how quickly the weather can change. Hurricanes are simply a part of coastal living, and the personality of each storm is unique. Hurricane Fran is a good example. She overcame great odds in September of 1996 and managed to make quite a name for herself in North Carolina. But our story doesn't begin in the month of September. It actually begins in July of '96 with a developing tropical storm east of the Caribbean. And the name wasn't Fran, it was Bertha.
We need to get down to storm zone right now.
Okay.
Come on, Don.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right, let's go. All right, here we go, sweetie.
Hurry.
Here we go.
The center part of your house.
We have to
Debris! Watch out!
In the early summer of 1996, weather ruled the box office. The movie Twister was a big hit and inspired a new generation of meteorologists. But in the real world, eastern North Carolina residents had grown complacent, especially when it came to hurricanes. It had been nearly 10 years since a hurricane made landfall in our state and over 30 years since a Category 3 or higher. But things were about to change in a big way.
Yeah, you got that right. In fact, on July 6th, Tropical Storm Bertha was named east of the Leeward Islands. Favorable conditions allowed the storm to strengthen, and on July 9th, winds reached 115 miles an hour, making Bertha the first July hurricane to reach Category 3 status in 70 years. Bertha fluctuated in intensity over the next 2 days, continuing to follow a classic northwest path towards the Carolinas. But the timing was all wrong. Although the hurricane season runs from June through November, most North Carolina storms strike in August or September, not July. But there are exceptions to every rule, and Bertha turned out to be one. She reorganized into a Category 2 hurricane and set a course for the WNCT viewing area. Bertha made landfall with 105-mile-an-hour winds, dumped up to 9 inches of rain, and leveled nearly $100 million in insured damage in North Carolina alone. But Bertha's departure left residents with a cautious sense of optimism about the remainder of the season. With such an active start, maybe the rest of the summer would be quiet. In reality, things turned out to be very different.
By late August, 3 new systems had emerged in the Atlantic: Edouard, Fran, and Gustav. Of the 3, Edouard was by far the most impressive. The Category 4 storm held major hurricane status for 8 days, largely at the expense of Fran. When a powerful hurricane churns the ocean surface, cooler water below the surface is released. The process is called upwelling. The cooler water slows the development of any new storms that may follow. So as Edouard grew stronger, Fran grew weaker. In fact, Fran almost didn't make it to tropical storm status. On August 25th, while still just a depression, Fran was barely hanging on. By August 26th, she appeared to fall apart altogether. So the National Hurricane Center issued its final advisory on Fran, or so it seemed. It's amazing to consider that one of the worst natural disasters in North Carolina history almost didn't happen. In late August of 1996, powerful Hurricane Edouard was tearing apart tropical system Fran. It appeared she wouldn't make it, but fate finally intervened on August 31st. In response to an approaching low-pressure trough, Hurricane Edouard accelerated away from Fran. This allowed her the time she needed to reorganize, and by September 1st, Fran was a strengthening hurricane. To make matters worse, she was moving closer to the U.S. mainland. Landfall was becoming increasingly likely, but the all-important question was where.
Well, the main reason that hurricanes are so difficult to predict is that they don't often move under their own power. In the case of Hurricane Fran, a low-pressure system over Tennessee teamed up with a high-pressure ridge in the Atlantic. This forced Fran on a north-northwesterly course straight for North Carolina. A favorable environment allowed her to intensify, and by September 4th, Fran had become a Category 3 hurricane with maximum sustained winds of 120 miles per hour. Landfall was only a day away, and the WNCT viewing area was projected to be in the right front quadrant. current. In this part of the storm, forward momentum combines with counterclockwise wind circulation to maximize storm surge. Storm surge is a rise in ocean water that travels onshore in advance of a hurricane. It's created primarily by wind action against the ocean's surface as the storm nears land. Surge can wipe out even well-built structures at the point of landfall and is considered to be one of the greatest killers with any hurricane. With the dawn of September 5th, residents were rushing to complete preparations. Some had fled to the Triangle area to escape the worst of Fran's effects. They would soon be reminded that there is no truly safe place to be when a hurricane strikes.
Hurricane Fran made landfall over the Cape Fear area at 8:30 p.m. on September 5th. Sustained winds of 115 miles an hour plowed into southeastern North Carolina. Gusts of 137 miles an hour were reported near Wilmington but could not be officially verified. It was in Wilmington that some of the first iconic images surfaced, including damage to the steeple of the First Baptist Church, a building which dated back to the Civil War. With a forward speed of nearly 20 miles an hour, Fran churned northward, pushing a 10 to 12-foot storm surge into the Crystal Coast. Over 400 homes in Emerald Isle were damaged, and many structures were destroyed, including the Emerald Isle Fishing Pier. Bogue Inlet Pier lost 150 feet. Storm surge caused damage as far north as Swansboro and New Bern and carved new inlets in Onslow County. Fran spawned several tornadoes, and wind gusts as high as 100 miles an hour occurred in Pitt County. And it wasn't just the wind and storm surge creating problems. Rainfall totals in excess of 12 inches occurred in parts of the state, overwhelming creeks and streams. Flooding was widespread along the Neuse and Tar rivers, and the flooding wasn't limited to coastal counties. As Fran continued northward, the eye took aim on Raleigh and the Triangle. Crabtree Creek spilled its banks, flooding the lower levels of the nearby mall. Hurricane-force wind gusts leveled trees and knocked out power for over 1 million Triangle residents. But there was a silver lining to Fran's movement. She was traveling at a brisk pace and weakening quickly. Just 18 hours after her initial landfall, Hurricane Fran weakened into a tropical depression while pushing into West Virginia. But she had left her mark, claiming the lives of 24 North Carolinians in the process.
Hurricane Fran quickly became one of the costliest natural disasters in North Carolina history, with estimates between $2 and $3 billion. The numbers are impressive, but the images tell the story more effectively.
Swansboro is a little bit wounded right now, but the people of Swansboro know how to come back, and the merchants will be back bigger and better than ever.
The water is lapping right up to the edge of the cottages. There's no space in between them.
It was horrendous. It was scary.
I don't know if we're going to be able to save this house.
It's just something that's devastating what a hurricane could do, and I feel really bad for those people that lost their homes.
This was a Category 3. I couldn't imagine 4 or 5.
When hurricanes strike, we tend to focus on coastal damage, and rightfully so. But a system like Fran can have a devastating impact on farmers. Over $700 million in agricultural losses was reported, including severe damage to cotton, tobacco, and corn crops. Over 15,000 hogs were lost during the storm, and nearly 1 million poultry. From farmers to fishermen, residents to tourists, Fran left nearly everyone with a story to tell. Sometimes the most interesting stories come from those who worked during the hurricane. North Topsail Beach was one of the hardest hit areas during the 1996 storm season.
It was like a war zone. If you've ever been in a war zone, everything had been damaged.
Braxton, who was the town commissioner at the time, remembers working to keep people safe during the storm.
I stayed here during Bertha, but not during Fran. We got off the island. That was my job, to get everybody off the island that we could.
Once Fran passed, the damage left behind was incredible. The North Topsail Beach police station had previously been wiped out by Bertha and was swept away by Fran. Damage estimates in North Topsail Beach and Carteret County alone topped $500 million.
It was pretty depressing to look at. It was houses washed out in the road on the way down to my house, and a lot of erosion.
Everybody wanted to come down and help. And then when it's all put back together, you say, great. It's better than it was before. That's the only thing you can say about a hurricane.
When police, fire, rescue, or really any first responder goes to work in a hurricane, communication is vital, to say the least. The technology has changed quite a bit since Hurricane Fran. Now you can create your own virtual command center in the comfort of your own home with the internet and social media. But things get a little more complicated when the power goes out. Throughout many storms in North Carolina's history, when traditional methods fail, a dedicated group of people has kept the reports coming in: ham operators.
When I was about 12 years old, I got a crystal radio set for Christmas. And then one day I was listening and I heard a man talking, and I knew it wasn't that radio station. I couldn't figure out what was going on. So I talked to some buddies at school, and they said, "Oh, I know who that was. That was a ham radio operator." And I said, "Well, what's that all about?" So here we are. Got first licensed at age 14. And so I've been in and out of the hobby for all these years. Well, ham radio, I guess, goes back to the early days of wireless communication. But as things evolved, ham radio began to use voice communication just like commercial communications. Ham radio has a number of frequency bands at its disposal. It goes all the way from really, really low frequencies down near the AM broadcast band all the way up into the microwave frequencies. There are many bands that are available.
Ham radio communication can be very simple.
You can operate on a battery, you can operate on the power of an automobile alternator and battery combination. You can operate on solar power.
These amateur operators can also be used as a vital mode of communication, especially during a natural disaster.
Cell phones go down, right, landline phones go down, and what happens is public service communication, fire, police, rescue, they get overloaded.
Yes, amateur radio is limited to certain frequencies for use, but in a situation like a hurricane or tropical storm, ham operators have designated spots on their dial to relay real-time observations to the National Hurricane Center.
They want to know vital information about not only weather, but damage in particular. And so there is what we call a net. It's a specific frequency where people can check in and pass that information along. And so that's always there during any hurricane.
Staying informed is the key to surviving any hurricane, and having a good supply checklist is critical. But what do you really need? Chances are you'll need more than you think.
So what do you do if a storm threatens? If a hurricane watch is issued, it means hurricane force conditions are possible in 48 hours. You should have plenty of time to gather supplies.
At some point during the storm, the power will likely fail, so don't forget flashlights and batteries. Make sure you have plenty of bottled water on hand for drinking and bathing, and stock up on non-perishable foods.
Remember, ATM and credit card machines may be down, so keep an emergency cash on hand. Make sure you have a full tank of gas in your car in case of emergency, and then be sure to fill any needed prescriptions and medications before the storm hits. It's also a good idea to have copies of important documents like insurance cards.
Most importantly, stay safe. Keep a battery-powered NOAA weather radio with you at all times to monitor warnings, and don't attempt to travel during the storm. Even after the storm clears, never attempt to drive through standing water. You don't know the conditions of the road underneath. It may have been severely damaged or swept away altogether.
And remember, WNCT will provide continuous storm coverage on television, online, and with our local radio partners. And don't forget to download the WNCT First Alert mobile weather app. It's a personal weather station right at your fingertips with constant access to hurricane tracking tools, watch warning information, street level radar, and current observations for any location of your choice. The app is free of charge and available in the Apple App Store or Google Play.
Of course, these are merely tools. They mean nothing without a dedicated team, and nothing beats experience. Our staff has nearly 40 years of combined forecasting experience here in eastern North Carolina. We've been through hurricanes before, and we'll be ready when the next one comes.
Two 2016 marks the 20-year anniversary of Hurricane Fran. It's hard to believe that 2 decades have gone by since Fran made landfall. Incidentally, the name Fran was retired in 1997, so no storm will ever again claim that name. But another storm like Fran may head our way one day. Here's hoping we have a good long wait. From all of us here at WNCT and the First Alert Weather Team, I'm Chief Meteorologist Jerry Jackson. Thank you for joining us.